thinking about this morning what to say, and I think it's an extremely, extremely important video. I hear time and time again. I mean, I remember this year President's Day. There was some admittedly curmudgeonly, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but left-wing writer who said he hates President's Day. He hates the whole idea of the president. And he's like, and what should we do? What do we need president? What do we do on President's Day? We dress up we put on knickers and put on a powdered wig and own slaves. What is it all for? What do we need this for? Now, this question, in ways, it's a valid question, but an extremely foolish one. I mean, obviously, he's saying it in a tongue-in-cheek manner, but what he's saying, first of all, is entirely insulting and entirely ridiculous. What do I mean? Well, it's based on a total ignorance of history. And we have to become aware of what history is really all about. Hillsdale College recently concluded, but still available, and it's worthwhile to see. I didn't see the whole thing, but I've seen parts of it. A series of lectures, which is based on what they present for their own college students, which they call the American Heritage. And Dr. Arnn, who's the president of Hillsdale College, he said, why do we call this course on American history American Heritage as opposed to American history? The answer is, there's a difference between heritage and history. History is just everything that happened. Heritage is what do we want to hold on to, which includes lessons from our mistakes. That's also part of the heritage. Our frailties, our mistakes, our sins are essentially part of our heritage as human beings, and it's part of human society. Not to continue in those mistaken ways, but to learn from them, to make sure we don't repeat them. But things that are good, things that are useful, things that are worthwhile, we hold on to. And then there are certain things that are totally trivial and are forgotten for the most part. But all of it is history, not all of it is heritage. Even essentially stand for. That 1% kernel of goodness is extremely, extremely valuable, and I would venture even to say it's an act of divine providence and a divine gift for our society to grow and evolve in the way that God plans it to do so. I'm talking here to say that even things that might run contrary to conservative values should the conservative, the intelligent and educated conservative should seek out the positive outcomes from those things that are, for the most part, problematic, and embrace those good kernels as being part of God's gift to us in the genuine progress of society, while discarding the klipa, the shell, the husk, the peel. This is Kabbalistic terminology of how things that are good are often covered with a shell, covered with, you can't eat the outside of the walnut, but inside is what they call the meat of the walnut. You can't eat the eggshell necessarily, although perhaps there's calcium that you could gain from it. Kabbalistically, we kind of found on that, of what I've heard. I'm not sure, I didn't see it inside the Sefer, but I've heard it in the name of people who have somewhat of a name, even if I'm not 100% sure about them. And also, whatever it is, and inside there's the egg, but then the egg has to be cooked. The raw egg, although it might have some good qualities to it, can also make you sick. And all of this is a parable, it's a mashal for things in society, revolutions in society. Like I mentioned not too long ago in a video, I remember hearing Deacon Kevin McCormick on Religion on the Line, a devout Catholic man, a member of the clergy, a deacon, saying that he feels that the Protestant Reformation was the best thing for the Catholic Church. I would venture to say that what he's saying by that is that if it were not for things that the Catholic Church changed within itself in reaction to the Protestant Reformation, if they would have just remained totally stagnant and not changed, I would venture to say that Deacon McCormick would be Protestant today and not a Catholic. But because the Church adjusted itself in the ways that it could, while maintaining its traditions to the point where it still remained the Catholic Church in their own definition, this man is today a devout Catholic. And that, again, could be a mashal for other things. However, on the other hand, there's changes that sometimes are too radical. Reagan said, and certain people who consider themselves to be true Catholics, right? I'm just saying this as a parable, as an example, not to teach Catholicism. said, President Reagan said, that he did not leave the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party left him. In a similar way, someone who was close to Reagan, who worked for Reagan, Mark Levin, says, you know, he's a Jew. He's proud to be Jewish. But he says where he lives in northern Virginia, within an hour, maybe an hour and a half of his home, there's no synagogue, anybody in the world who has any brains thinks we should go back to slavery or to segregation or to any of these things, that are gone, and we're thankful that they're gone. And really, if you really study history, even though people will say maybe slavery is not the main issue of the Civil War, this and that, if you really study it, really slavery was the main issue of the Civil War. However, is the issue of states' rights totally a moot point because slaveholders were arguing for states' rights? The answer has to be yes and no, meaning states don't have a right to own slaves, and the reason for that is the Constitution made an amendment to the Constitution prohibiting slavery. And so you can't be a member of this union of the states and be a slave state. It would require secession from the union. And it would be a horrible thing because slavery doesn't fit into our modern society. But the point, what I'm saying is, does that mean that every person who owns slaves should be a persona non grata to us? Which is what many people on the left would like to promote, but I'm not sure if they're promoting that in an honest way, or it's just a convenient way to uproot everything. Because, since the founders of this country owned slaves, they'll say there's nothing good from them because they own slaves. That's such an evil, and we agree it's evil. We forget that it's the Republicans who freed the slaves. But the Republicans who freed the slaves understood that they were fulfilling the goal that the founders originally intended in founding the country. They were ridding themselves of something that was not part of the American heritage, but rather part of American history, and something that had to be rendered to the dustbin of history, or to the things that we have to remember so that we shouldn't forget them, so we should learn from the lessons and not repeat them, even though essentially they are being repeated today, even in America, even from the left, especially from the left. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, if you really look at the whole issue of immigration reform, what's it about? Well, if you have someone who's here illegally, you don't have to pay them a fair wage, and you can work them. You don't exactly enslave them, but you're pretty close. And that's why the Democrats, they realize they can't have the slaves like they used to have, so they have the closest thing. That's really what it's all about, and that's what essentially, in addition to the national security issues of securing the border from terrorists who might come in together with these open borders, it's the issue really of fairness to the people who are here, that if they were documented, they would be treated in the, meaning the left devised this whole issue with some good points to it, many good points to it, of how labor is organized. Some good points, some bad points to it. To the point where many aspects of this have been codified to laws in many jurisdictions. You have a minimum wage, all these things, which again could be argued, the good side and the bad side to these issues. But when you have someone who anyway is working illegally, you don't have to pay them a minimum wage. And so they keep it that way because they want to subvert the very things that they brought about. Because they want to create different classes of society and so forth for various nefarious purposes. Mostly about keeping power. Now, that being said, there's we got to go back to what we're saying. So do we say that just because the Confederates sought out states' rights, that the idea of states' rights has to be thrown away? Well, it depends. What rights are they seeking? There are certain rights that are legitimate, there's certain ones that are illegitimate. But we see what the left believes that. The left, we see the whole idea of sanctuary cities. That's essentially a states' rights issue. That's, Mark Levin rightly points out that that's a neo-Confederacy. That's true. To say that the states are nullifying federal law, that's essentially a neo-Confederate approach. The same thing, the question of marijuana, legalization of marijuana. What right do states have to legalize something that the federal government prohibits? They have a right to say that the state will not prosecute it, but that doesn't give people the right to violate federal law. And other similar questions. Now, should Congress, for example, when it comes to a question like marijuana, should Congress say they're going to leave this up to the states? Probably. When it comes to immigration, though, constitutionally they cannot, because this is an international issue that states have zero jurisdiction over. And so when it comes to the marijuana question, probably a legitimate states' rights issue, but it has to be dealt with legally. Until Congress changes the law, the states certainly have the right to decriminalize marijuana, but that doesn't give the citizen, who's a citizen both of the state where they reside and a citizen of the United States, it gives them no right to violate the law, which is federal law. They can't do that. They have no right to do it. The states have the right to decriminalize it, but the people have no right to violate federal law, even if the state allows it. Faggy, we're here. Oh, it's so. Let me get these Sfarim. Take that with you, or no, you can leave it on the floor, I guess. And are you done with it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Unlock the door. You don't know how to unlock the door? Alright, love you. See you later. So you're going to go on the bus. Mommy's going to get you. Get this candle. Alright. So, alright. Now, the federal government might have a right to decide what they are going to enforce and what they're not going to enforce, and when they're going to enforce things and they're not going to enforce things. So, for example, if someone commits a crime under the influence of marijuana, the federal government, probably should step in and prosecute marijuana charge. But it's up to, the question is, well, all of these issues, but, so like a state, has a right to say they're not going to be involved in these issues, but that doesn't give them. If he would just keep going, if he didn't slow down there, all right. Have to wait till after these cars go by. So anyway, and these type of questions are. This bus is coming too quickly. These questions are valid and are valid questions. How do we deal with this? But that's neither here nor there. This is just examples of much deeper questions. Which I think we're already at the half-hour mark, so we'll have to make it to a separate video now, or else just nobody's going to watch it. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.